you went around the world with a silhouette of any character you could ever think of, I think probably one of the most recognizable characters that the whole world would spot is Godzilla. That silhouette is in all popular culture, and it doesn't even matter if you've ever seen the movie or not. Everybody sees that thing that looks like a giant dinosaur over a city, and they just know it's Godzilla.
The brand of Godzilla has been around a long, long time.
The first movie came out in 1954, so it's a long period of time for the fan base to continually be there and grow.
You know he existed. Everyone somehow, you'd heard of Godzilla. You knew he was this giant monster. Beyond that, I didn't know much more else. When I was a teenager on Channel 4 on a Friday night, they would have a creature feature. These looked like some sort of sci-fi film. And then as it got going, it was kind of realized it was Japanese, and then a bit further in, it was like, oh, hang on, this is Godzilla.
I thought it was fantastic and marvelous. And at the time, you're watching these miniatures and Godzilla's crushing through Tokyo. Crush everything. Godzilla didn't apologize for anything. He just destroyed everything in his wake.
One of the most iconic creatures that's ever been created in the cinema.
The 1954 black and white film was a real surprise because it's so serious.
Original one was not just a monster movie.
It's one big metaphor for Hiroshima.
It was my father's.
The fact that Japan made this film 9 years after the bomb and brought this metaphorical creature to our consciousness, that's why it had such lasting power.
As with the '54 original, there are sly, subtle comments being made that don't get in the way of the storytelling and the entertainment.
Japan back then, they were heavily censored by the West after World War II, but I think if they could have made a film about Hiroshima and what they went through, they would have, but they weren't allowed to, so they disguised it as a monster movie, you know, where this thing smashes up a city, leaves radiation behind.
It's a myth. That's why it survived, because the great myths is part of our DNA. He represents the force of nature, and we'll always be fascinated with monsters and what they represent.
It's a very poetic construct, and I think it goes very deep to a crucial time in our history, but I think that's why it had such lasting power.
Godzilla has become these amazing mythological stories to retell, and it's like it can always come back and be relevant.
Godzilla needed to feel like the original, iconic Godzilla that Toho Studios in 1954 first unleashed. We just needed him to feel like it was the real Godzilla, not the man in the suit.
I was kind of nervous because, with the exception of Godzilla, each film can be about anything it wants. You can have a completely different character, a completely different storyline. But what is a Godzilla movie?
It's a huge responsibility working on a film as big as this with such a legacy. And also the fan base, there's a lot of expectations.
Something that we had always been a bit nervous about was how to really sync up something as massive as Godzilla with the human scale and the interactions of human characters and stakes of human characters that were not just disaster, but how does the story of the creature actually interweave with the story of our characters?
Taking it back to the roots of making sure that it's very grounded, scary, and that Godzilla is awe-inspiring when he makes his entrances.
This is not going to be some silly, cheesy Hollywood movie. It's going to be like an emotional, epic, cinematic blockbuster. I really want to make something that's going to stand the test of time.
I didn't look at this movie as trying to do better than any other Godzilla movie. In my mind, it was, how do we make this the best movie?
Gareth came in with a very definite sense of how to do that in terms of how to achieve Godzilla in the frame or destruction in the frame in an achievable way. Gareth was completely at the cutting edge with that.
There's not a better monster ever. You know, this is the one.
We tried to come up with the real guy, like what would nature really create that would be all those shapes, and I really think we've got a very cool design for him.
Gareth had a great design of the texture of lava. It has this sort of dark, flat look to it, but it has all these little fine details and pockmarks and irregularity to it. So that was sort of a guide in terms of his overall textural feel to him.
We had loads of designs from Weta and everybody chipped in, and we kind of got close quite quickly to something that looked good. But then when it was built in 3D, you rotate him and you're like, that bit's not. So I used to do these sessions with Andrew Baker from Weta over the internet, and he'd rotate the model and we'd push and pull things and he would keep tweaking it. And the idea was to be able to rotate the whole thing and not see a bad angle, because he was going to be in silhouette a lot in our film. So we just wanted to always keep the silhouette strong. And it took a long, long time, but I'm really proud of what we came up with, because there's a lot of things in filmmaking that are compromises and you have little regrets over, but I never really look at Godzilla and go, oh, I want to tweak that. Like, I always think, oh yeah, it's cool.
I think that what will define it will be its believability.
That's Gareth's edict, is that this has to look absolutely real, and you want to believe that there's a 300-foot thing, you know, crawling around the streets of San Francisco.
No, you're dealing with a mythical monster, effectively, but I think that Gareth will render it real. And I think that that will be a culmination of the evolution of visual effects, for instance.
We always try and give things a grounded perspective. Like, there's a lot of shots in our movie, especially with the monsters in it, are usually from a human perspective.
It's not going to be, here's the giant creature in the background, let's keep moving, you know, where we think we would be. It's going to be more on the action on the people, and you'll see a giant foot of Godzilla come through.
The way that we shot it, which was in a very visceral way, you know, we imbued it with handheld techniques that are close quarters, as well as drawing back to witness the scale of it, this epic scenario.
I don't like putting a camera anywhere a camera can't go. So I don't like getting footage of the creatures in a way that would be impossible. So it either has to be a helicopter, handheld, someone on the ground.
You go on the journey with it, you know, everything's kind of shot from POVs, it's shot through people's perspectives of the monsters fighting.
For instance, in the end of the movie, in the whole third act, there's this big battle, and it was really important to me that all the shots that we get feel like they could have been achieved. What we used to say was, these giant creatures, we're going to get them on set, they're going to come, you have limited control, you can kind of steer them left and right, they're going to fight. So, like a sporting event, like, set up your cameras where you think you're going to capture the best footage and be ready. And so I wanted the end of the Act 3 stuff to feel a bit like some of the cameramen were unprepared and they got what they got. And that's when I break a rule, because sometimes that approach just doesn't tell the story well enough, you know, and you have to, like, cheat.
I think with the type of story that Gareth wants to tell, he would much prefer, where he can, to shoot it in a real location as opposed to a set on stage.
I know there are creatures that probably in the world don't really exist, only digitally. Will they ever exist? Fantastic thing is, though, everything else is real.
Will make it much easier for us because we can match into something now rather than having to create everything from, you know, total CG.
Jim has this whole other world, this whole other layer that's got to be added in behind this. We are kind of the human level, and then I guess the visual effects is sort of adding that other level.
It's a giant creature, but the creature's not coming after you. You're just sort of in the aftermath of what's happening. You know, he's worried about something else, not about you, you know, you puny little thing down there.
Human beings are to the creatures what ants are to human beings. And we're sort of incidental, and they're completely unaware of what we're doing.
They're just this giant volcano that's going on that you can't stop. Gareth is always about putting humans in the foreground. So if you have the big creature here, you know, we're always sticking these little humans sort of like watching the fight up above, you know, or we're putting humans on rooftops or through windows that you're shooting past.
You're always looking for that point of reference where you know the size of something. So it's like, okay, I know how big that is, so this must be massive. And that thing, typically, the best thing you can go to is a human, because everyone knows how big a guy is. And so a lot of the shots in the film, we always trying to get a person in there, or at least something that give it some scale. And also the reason the person is probably the best thing to go to is that there's an emotional connection you have. Like, you think, imagine being him.
We've never seen anything 350 feet tall moving like that. The current thought is, as the creature gets larger, you're also scaling down the movement, because now his hand, rather than, you know, when I swat across, rather than going 3 feet, my hand's going 3 blocks. You know, just the mass and physics of that is impossible at normal human speed. So you have to sort of slow it down.
I mean, that juxtaposition is going to be wonderful to see the scale. When you see a person against the size of Godzilla, it's going to draw people's breath.
We couldn't find any 300-foot actors around, so it's going to all have to be created digitally. With his background in visual effects, Gareth knows how to achieve it. He's exactly explaining the shot frame by frame as we're shooting.
7 o'clock, 7 and 8, towards 8, towards 8 and 9, and we start to rise up. And you guys lean back, slowly, lean back.
You really do have to go above and beyond sometimes your own imagination to be able to conceive what's happening. And I'm listening to Gareth talk about, okay, at this point, this laser point, you're looking, he'll run down there and we're looking at this massive green screen.
The previs they've done already, you get a good sense of what you're seeing. You know, there are moments you have to work out how big the thing, you know, what are we looking at here? And then he'll go, right, well, it's about 300 foot high. All right, so is that over there? No, he's not that close. He's a bit further away, so it's up there. So you kind of got to get the geography of the creatures.
It really is actually harder than to act against something that is strictly in your imagination. So you just have to imagine the size and scope of the monster itself and what is happening at any given time and how quickly they move. And it's a challenge.
Impact. Back off, run.
Me and hundreds of extras in the middle of this crowded bumper-to-bumper traffic. We all stop, and then we had to imagine 3 monsters, which were really like the tip of this building, and the tip of that building, and this window over here on that building.
You can
the
start back
corner of that pretty building on the top. So that was a fun little imagination challenge.
I mean, we're dealing with something that is really, really big here. It's got to be scary. It's got to benefit from the highest quality visual effects. And there are going to be thousands of people working and creating, and wonderful artists making all this stuff. So there's no sense saying that it's going to be all about the simplicity and about the drama, because it won't be. That we're at the cutting edge of visual effects in this film. I think what we will try to attempt to do is to make it invisible, so that the technique won't be heavy-handed. It will be really true, and it will have a vivid quality.
There's a huge amount just to get those creatures to be as lifelike and perfect as possible.
So I know with a lot of the new technologies that they have, particularly the preciseness that you can roto things these days, it takes a lot longer to do that process rather than just pulling a green screen.
There's been a big endeavour to do a lot of things where there isn't green screen used. There's a lot of roto work being done in post. But a lot of the time, the majority of the time, we're on location.
But it tends to look better because you don't get a lot of the spill, you get all the natural light. It's sort of easier to blend the CG world into the real world if you do this roto process rather than just put the green screen.
Wait, no, stop! With his storytelling and with visual effects and what we will produce through the art department, environments that the director and the actors and DP can work in, I think there will be a complete illusion that this is really happening for an audience.
I'm hoping to bring out, you know, the massiveness of this creature as you pan up and here's this wall sort of coming at you. He's going to be walking around in water and, you know, fighting in water, and he's going to go into San Francisco and destroy towns with his other nemesis, the other creature.
Everyone you show the film to, you know, there's this feeling that they don't fully understand what it's going to be like. And we have all this previs and storyboards and all sorts. So whenever you show it anyone, you go, no, it's going to look better than this. And you're always kind of reassured. No, imagine this looking real, and don't worry about the fact it looks like a computer game. And you say this over and over in your mind thinking, you know, because I can picture what it's going to look like. And then one day we sit down and a shot comes in that is photoreal. And even I sit there and go, oh my God, like, that's amazing.
We were sitting in a screening with Gareth and the producers, and we saw one of the first tests, and you heard this gasp go through the room, which is like, wow, it's going to be really good. You know, you just heard everybody go, when you saw the first images of this creature. It's good to see that very early on rather than biting your nails to the last month waiting for the final look.
is that realization that you didn't really ever picture what it was really going to look like. Because when you finally get it, it looks so good. And it's such a relief because you've been trying to sculpt this film for so long. It's not had any of these effects in it, really, and you've been trying to get the story right and get all the character development right and all the set pieces. And you sit with this computer game for so long, and then suddenly this is a beautiful thing which is happening now, which is the shots start coming in, and one by one, it just elevates the movie. And shots that you used to think were like the average or maybe not such the, the black sheep of the family, they weren't the greatest, suddenly take pole position, you know what I mean? You think, oh, that's my favorite shot in the film.
It has that reality and sense of scale.
You suddenly remember why you wanted to do this sequence, because the feeling you get watching it is really cool compared to what we've been looking at for a long time, which has been working from a story point of view, but just believability hasn't always been there.
The creatures got to where I was hoping they'd get to, because, normally you can do CG creatures and it's like, they don't quite look correct, but these things look absolutely real. Just the quality of the lighting, the dynamics as they walk through the light, as they interact with each other, it's all really great. That last little bit is where you're really fine-tuning everything, and that's sort of the most nerve-wracking, because you're literally like changing lights and making the light feel correct. So as you light a creature, you don't get a big highlight, but you have to get very sort of moody and spotlit and lit by a number of different sources.
You set out saying we shouldn't have the perfect shot because in real life you wouldn't be able to get the perfect shot. It would all kind of be chaotic. And then when you try and do it, you go, okay, we've got to make this shot more perfect. And it's knowing when to stop, because you want to add a flock of birds in perfectly. You want to do the animation so there's a roar exactly when we pan to the creature. You start committing all the crimes that when I sit and watch films I roll my eyes at. And so you have to stop yourself, and I haven't always been able to. You feel like you got lucky, like, oh my God, how did that happen? And the answer is there was no luck involved at all. It was really hard work from a lot of talented people that worked all hours to deliver this thing looking faultless.
I think audiences will feel themselves within the drama in this one. That's what we're trying to attempt. And I think Gareth has got a great sense of human drama, of the tiny things that people experience, that is life, but at the same time framed with this great monster behind us. I think it's going to create a wonderful cauldron of excitement.
Stylistically, what Gareth brought to it beyond that tonal approach was he really used suspense and restraint in how he would show the creature. It was about what you didn't see versus what you saw, so that by the end of the movie, when you get to that creature-on-creature action that you've been waiting for, it really delivers.
It was really important that when we finally revealed Godzilla in all his glory the first time, I kind of wanted to spend 5 minutes building up to that, not just like, oh, here's 2 shots and then we see him. It was like, all right, let's really milk this. So like every little gag I could think of with the lights off and the tsunami and the lights coming back on and the explosions, and it was just like trying to weave a little path through all these cool visuals that just tease. You see a bit more, you see a bit more, and then finally you see him properly. And then don't see him. It's on TV. That's my favorite bit, I think, is that you've sat there and you go, okay, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it, we're gonna get it. And then we cut to this child and the television. That's when I chuckle, I get my most thrill, because it's really not what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to have the big battle for 20 minutes, and I love the fact we don't, and I love the fact we hold back, and it makes the end, when you get it, I think feel more powerful.